Hey, my name is Crispin Jensen, owner and founder of LifeStart Training. This week, we will be diving into part 2 of 2 for barriers to Canadians taking first aid and why we need to constantly think outside of the box. Okay, so now let's dive into number 3. It's too complicated and I end up leaving feeling less confident after a first aid class. So we touched a little bit on this in the last 2 comments. So if you make something overly complicated or use terminology that is above the participant's reading grade level, they will most likely feeling more confused and less confident. We need to be able to understand that first aid in the workplace is more of a skill requirement than a literacy requirement. Having participants be able to use, life-saving skills and practice during an emergency can actually promote better retention rates than making sure that they understand all of the correct terminology and step-by-step directions. Often when we're talking about step-by-step directions, so this revolves around perfect ideal world scenarios where, this is rarely the case. So let's teach participants to think for themselves, think on their feet, think outside the box. This will give them the ability and confidence to assist during an emergency situation. The 4th point is that first aid training is too expensive. Standard or intermediate training ranges from $95 to $150 across Canada. Most often, this is paid out of pocket and not by the companies that they work for. Especially during the pandemic, prices for everything had raised due to inflation, and first aid training companies all across Canada need to be able to make a living. If we can offer better alternative programs that allow less in-class time, there could actually be potential to lower the cost of the first aid training. However, currently the only option is a blended program where half is done online and the other half is done in person. If we can get the in-person training component down to half a day, training companies could offer 2 training sessions in one day and help to lower their overall overhead costs, which can then result in lower pricing for the first aider and the end consumer. And the final remark that I typically get or have participants ask me before booking is, I'm not good at reading and writing and I don't know if I will be able to complete the final exam and get an 80%. This is probably the most cause for concern because participants are so concerned about getting that 80% on the final exam. That should be pretty well mostly skill-based. This is a huge barrier as 48% of the Canadian population falls well below high school literacy rates. The old dated memorize and test method clearly is not working. And plus, there's almost an unwritten rule with every single first aid company across Canada for basic and intermediate training that the instructors, when they're doing the test, they can do it verbally with the entire class, or if students don't get an 80% average, instructors will say, okay, go back, check these answers until you get an 80%. This is not an Atlantic or maritime thing. This is a Canada-wide issue. Why are we putting so much pressure on participants to hit an 80% average? Why is this not skill-based to make sure that they thoroughly understand the importance of the skills that they are learning? Okay? Because this is how you learn, by making mistakes. Would you rather get first aid from somebody who got a 96 on the test but couldn't compress on a chest to save their life? Or would you prefer somebody who got a 96 average of compression to chest depth ratio, when they were supposed to be compressing? The entire training industry needs a complete overhaul. To date, there hasn't been anybody but LifeStart willing to call out the iniquities in the industry itself. This is something that we have been pushing for and will continue to push for. Every participant has the right and should be able to take first aid training. It's a life-applicable skill that is sorely lacking in 2/3 of all Canadians. As always, if you have any questions or comments, let us know and stay tuned next week for proof that CPR can help save a life.